Tonight on Quantum, a painful problem that will affect half of all men over 60, but it's been too embarrassing to talk about.
You could put old Percy away and next minute you wet your pants.
A new treatment is putting the P back into prostate. And recycled paper. Most ends up at the tip. A natural solution could see it going back into print. Hello and welcome to Quantum. Also tonight, using corrosion as a clock to reveal the secrets of Australia's earliest maritime disasters. But first, aliens. Are they out there? Richard Smith has been listening in.
I think that the discovery that we are not alone in the universe would be probably the greatest scientific discovery of all time. It would transform our society in a way that's at least comparable with Copernicus and the discovery that the Earth is going around the sun, and with Darwin and the theory of evolution. And it's really only since the Second World War that we've had the technology available to actually find evidence for extraterrestrial life.
In October 1992, NASA launched what was planned to be the most comprehensive scientific search for extraterrestrial intelligent life ever conducted from Earth. However, it was also one of the shortest lived. Less than a year into the 10-year SETI program, NASA scientists encountered not intelligent aliens, but cost-cutting politicians in the US Congress.
It was like being punched in the stomach. We all went home and spent a real gloomy weekend, and then came back on Monday and decided if it had been a good idea on Friday, it was still a good idea on Monday, and we just have to figure out how to get the money to keep going.
There's something unstoppable about SETI, something fundamentally human about our desire to find out if we really are alone in the universe. It's not so surprising then that this mighty dish at Parkes in Western New South Wales is now interrogating the stars, and that from the ashes of the NASA search has risen Project Phoenix. Project Phoenix is a search for radio signals from outer space. It was rescued by the Californian-based SETI Institute with sponsorship money from Silicon Valley. Substantially modified and upgraded, the original NASA hardware was released to Project Phoenix on long-term loan. First stop on its extended world tour, the CSIRO's Parkes Radio Telescope.
This was a wonderful golden opportunity. There are candidate stars that can only be viewed from the Southern Hemisphere, and this is the best available telescope in the Southern Hemisphere.
We've continued what we think is the most important, the high-sensitivity targeted search. And that's what we're here to start in the southern skies today.
On February the 2nd, 1995, the telescope focused its giant electronic ear on nearest neighbour, Alpha Centauri.
It's a sort of needle in a haystack search. There are about 100 billion stars in our galaxy, any of which could have planets like the Earth, or many of them could. There's also the problem that we don't know what frequency the aliens might be transmitting on, so it's necessary to scan many frequencies simultaneously. And the technology to do this very rapidly has only recently been developed, and Project Phoenix is really the first really serious attempt to get to grips with this problem.
From those 100 billion stars in the Milky Way alone, Project Phoenix has chosen a mere 1,000 of our nearest neighbours, stars similar to our own sun. And for 5 months at Parkes, working in shifts around the clock, only about 200 stars will be scanned. But those 200 will be scanned very well.
Even in the first 3 minutes, we did more than the previous 30 years had done. Now, that doesn't mean the previous 30 years were worth nothing. It means that the technology has developed and the dedication has developed within people.
Project Phoenix is pushing commitment and technology to new levels. The CSIRO have found themselves upgrading the telescope, machining new feed horns, and taking over NASA's role to build the highly sensitive cryogenic receivers.
Slide 11.
And this is serious silicon. The power of these boards is awesome. They must handle more than 28 million frequency channels simultaneously, looking at each once a second. And as soon as a candidate signal is detected, the computers trigger a reference telescope 250 kilometres away at Mopra to verify the source.
This using two telescopes as an interferometer is a real key. The Earth moves through space, and as a result, provides a signature on a signal that's actually coming from the direction of the stars that's completely unique. And if we ever detect something that has that spectral signature, then, in fact, it's really a phenomenal clinching verification.
But just what sort of signal are we expecting to wash in from the vast ocean of space?
Imagine that you'd been marooned on a deserted island since birth, and for all that time, the only contact you'd had with the outside world was the murmur of the surf and the wheeling of the birds. Then one day, something remarkable happens. A message washes up the beach in a bottle. The question is, would you recognise the message as the product of a like-minded intelligence? Would you even recognise the bottle?
What do we hook here?
With so many possibilities, Project Phoenix is looking simply for a radio signal from a technology similar to our own and transmitted in the so-called microwave window, a band where the background radio noise of the universe is very low. But even with the search narrowed to this subset of possible signals, it can take days to scan each star.
What we're looking at on the screen is a small section of a 10 megahertz band that we're currently observing. And in that band is Pioneer 10, one of the spacecraft, which is just outside our solar system at this point in time. And Pioneer 10 is as close as what we can guess to what maybe an extraterrestrial signal might look like, a very narrow band signal.
It's early days yet, but so far these regular calibration tests on known spacecraft remain the only signals detected from beyond Earth orbit.
You must remember that the absence of evidence is not the same as the evidence of absence. You might search for 1 million years and not get a signal, but that doesn't prove there are no alien communities, and it doesn't even prove that there are no signals. We might be just doing it in the wrong way, or just not pointing the radio telescopes towards the right place.
But perhaps it's not even radio signals we should be looking for.
My view is that because of the way technology is going today, it's more likely to be lasers in the optical spectrum. It's also electromagnetic, but it's at a frequency which can convey far more information and which allows far tighter and stronger beams to be beamed across interstellar space.
For the moment, though, radio signals have the advantage. They're cheaper to send, we're ready to receive, and we think the microwave window is a pretty obvious place to look. In mid-1995, when all 200 southern sky stars have been interrogated from Parkes, Project Phoenix will head once again to the Northern Hemisphere to link up with other great radio telescopes, like Arecibo in Puerto Rico.
We'll probably never find out whether broadcasts from other worlds have been sweeping past the Earth invisibly for millions, perhaps even billions of years. Unseen by the trilobites, unnoticed by the dinosaurs, completely ignored by the early mammals. Now there are Earthlings who just might have the technology to intercept a signal. But have we evolved the maturity and the intellect that we need to answer the call?
We have come to visit you in peace and with goodwill.
And this idea that people are sort of rioting in the streets, I think is total nonsense. that over a number of generations, the transformation in our thinking, in our view of ourselves, in the world's religions, in our science, and generally in our understanding of our place in the universe would be dramatically transformed.
We're going where nobody's been before, but I guess we have to be the most cautious group of any, because we have to say, no, that's interference, no, that's seen on other stars. You can't say as a scientist, I believe. That's not enough. Scientists have to have evidence.
For these men, there's nothing more exciting than diving a shipwreck. Amongst the degraded remains, a chance find, no matter how small, could prove a treasure. Carefully restored, relics like these at Fremantle's West Australian Maritime Museum are a vital link to an era long gone.
Well-preserved shipwreck cargo is exceptionally rare. More often than not, the salty marine environment means precious artefacts simply rust away, taking their maritime secrets with them. But now there's evidence corrosion may be less of an evil than we'd thought. It could help reveal what's often a wreck's best-kept secret, its age.
When there are no written records, there's often no way of knowing exactly when a shipwreck took place. But new research has shown that when a ship goes down, it starts a sort of chemical clock in the form of corrosion of its onboard armoury. Believe it or not, this barnacle-encrusted blob is a ship's cannon. Underneath the marine growth, there's a layer of corroded cast iron that's chock-a-block with salt, or rather chloride ions that have come from the salty water.
Here at the Fremantle Museum, corroded cannons are routinely treated in tanks of caustic soda. When an electric current's applied, chloride ions are forced from the cannon's surface out into solution, stopping the rust in its tracks.
In the past 20 years, more than 18 cannons have been treated this way. While the method works well, it's a slow process that can take as long as 6 years. Along the way, conservators take lots of routine measurements. Water samples show how fast the chloride comes out, while drilling reveals how far the corrosion extends. From this vast body of seemingly unrelated information, a pattern emerged. How fast the chloride came out seemed to be intimately dependent on the depth of the corroded layer and on how long the cannon had been under the sea. What that meant was, with a few simple measurements and a calculator, the age of an unknown wreck could be revealed.
Tests on some of Australia's oldest shipwrecks have shown the new dating method definitely works. In fact, it can determine a wreck's age to within 3 or 4 years. And that's information that might never have come to light any other way.
Maintaining a steady stream, despite the steady passing of years, is a problem experienced by a surprising number of older men.
By the time they're 60, half of all Australian men are showing signs of an enlarged prostate. By the time they're 80, 4/5 are experiencing the symptoms, and those symptoms can be very, very irritating indeed.
Taxi.
G'day.
Doug Lucas can tell you how irritating.
Isn't it great for the farmers?
No, no.
eh?
Now, Doug likes a chat, he likes a good feed, and he loves being a taxi driver in rural Queensland. But he didn't in the days when his enlarged prostate made life a misery.
You'd sort of be very embarrassed in front of the customer that you'd have, that you'd, you know, say, look, you'll have to excuse me while I found a big tree or a toilet. Now, when you did go to the toilet, well, you just couldn't pass water. And then you could be there for a while, and then you could put old Percy away, and next minute you wet your pants.
You get the idea. Having an enlarged prostate is a real pain in the... well, you know what I mean. You'll be pleased to hear then that a group of Toowoomba doctors is trialling a whole new way of fixing the problem.
17 minutes on 50 plus. We'll go back.
But before we go into details, let's back up a bit. Precisely what is the problem? The walnut-sized prostate gland tucks neatly under the male bladder. Its job is to enrich semen and block off the flow of urine from the bladder during ejaculation. But for reasons still not entirely understood, in older men, the prostate can enlarge. It squeezes the urethra and makes urinating difficult. For the last 50 years or so, the conventional solution was to undergo a transurethral resection of the prostate, a rebore. That means scraping away the blocked urethra with a sharp implement. It's usually successful, but often bloody and nearly always terribly painful. Just ask patients like David Grunsell.
It was pretty gruesome, actually. I had nurses trying to evacuate blood clots and all sorts of things on the first operation.
So it wasn't exactly a pleasant experience?
No, it was 5 days of hell, actually. Yeah.
Fortunately, when David required a second operation, as is the case in 20% of transurethral resections, an alternative was at hand.
If you feel any pain at any time, you tell us, because you should feel none. You might feel a sensation of heat, but it shouldn't be painful. Oh, okay.
Dr. Jeff Buckham and his colleagues are using a radical new laser treatment for unblocking enlarged prostates. It's called thermotherapy. After just a local anaesthetic, they insert a laser into the penis, up through the urethra until it reaches the prostate, which it heats to about 65 degrees C. But this is no ordinary laser. It's a side-firing laser. By operating at precisely the right wavelength, the light blasts out sideways and cooks the protein in the prostate, rather like meat on a barbecue. But not only that, the probe is surrounded by a water jacket. That means while the prostate protein is cooking, the urethra is kept cool. It's a huge advantage.
Well, you can't damage the lining of the urethra. That's the important thing. And you don't get the bleeding, and you don't get all the discharge afterwards that you get with more conventional means.
During the new operation, there's just the minor discomfort of a rectal thermometer to make sure nothing gets too hot, and then a 40-minute wait while the prostate cooks.
Yep, we're finished.
After the operation, the cooked prostate tissue gradually shrivels up, unblocking the urethra.
And we've studied 35, 36 patients so far, and on average, you get about a third reduction in the prostatic size on the transrectal ultrasound measurements.
Not only is it effective, the technique is so non-invasive, patients get up and walk out of the operating theatre themselves.
Feel okay?
Yeah, fine.
Right, this way.
G'day, Jeff. Got time for a
There's
day?
another advantage. Its non-invasive nature means the new laser technique is also safe for those too fragile for the conventional treatment.
I suffer from emphysema, and the doctor thought the risk would be too great to have open surgery. So he decided to use this particular technique.
In addition, because so many Australian men from all walks of life are likely to suffer from enlarged prostate, a day surgery laser technique is also much cheaper than the normal 4 or 5 day stay in hospital.
In fact, back-of-the-envelope calculations suggest that use of these laser devices could save something like 1% of the Australian gross domestic product in the urology area alone.
Simple laser thermotherapy is a painless way to save money. Not to mention a painless way to triumph over the dreaded enlarged prostate.
All I can say to any man that doesn't have it done that way, there's something wrong with him.
You're looking at one of the biggest recycling problems on the planet. Wood. Every year, almost everywhere, it piles up on the Earth's surface. But there are ways of dealing with this. This is one of nature's solutions, an incredibly efficient wood recycler that, although it's orange, is called the white rot fungus. In fact, it's so efficient at doing its job in nature that maybe it can be put to work for us too. Here's the human equivalent of all that fallen wood. Great forests of stacked paper awaiting recycling. If we're lucky, it ends up in a plant like here, old boxes, newspapers, white office discards, telephone books, you name it, make a descent into paper hell. But the recycling process at present relies on brute force, not the fundamental biological agent that nature has on its side. The problem with our attempts to recycle is that all this paper contains one very tough molecule that's difficult to defeat, but it happens to be one that the white rot fungus eats for breakfast, lunch and tea. The molecule is lignin, a component of the wood from which paper is made. The white rot fungus wants to break down the lignin to eat the cellulose and hemicellulose, the very same fibrous compounds that the paper industry needs to give its recycled product mechanical strength.
The fungus is really rather clever. It produces an enzyme that generates an intermediate that actually attacks the molecule in a very random sort of way. So it's a fairly cunning strategy that the organism uses, and it really disrupts the structure of the lignin in many ways, and very rapidly.
The industrial potential of such an enzyme is pushing laboratories around the world to be the first to harness the fungus. But for the best result, you need to start with the right fungus, a step which might put this team at the Swinburne University of Technology in Melbourne out in front.
We incubated this one at 35 degrees, and as you can see, it not only hasn't decolorised, it hasn't grown at all, and therefore is of no use industrially.
This one, though, has grown quite fast.
Yeah, that's our major overseas competitor, that organism, and whilst it's grown very well, if you turn the plate over, you can see it hasn't decolorised at all, and therefore is of no real use to us industrially. Whereas if you look at the organism we use, if you turn that over, you can see it's completely decolorised through that middle area where it's growing, and it will continue to decolorise at a rate that's much faster than this organism.
Kitchen scouring pads, of all things, support the fungal colonies, which can be grown up in a bioreactor. The object is to grow as much of the hair-like fungal hyphae, which produce the enzyme, as possible. Once you've got your enzyme, it's simply a matter of adding it to your industrial waste. In this case, red dye for colouring wool. And within minutes, the enzyme starts breaking down the pollutants. Of course, to be useful in industry, the enzyme has to be produced quickly and in bulk.
When we started out, we were using a 600ml bench reactor, which is about the size of a milk carton. Then we went up to 10 litres, which I guess is, a couple of household buckets. And then we went from there to a 200-litre reactor, which is a fuel drum, the old 44-gallon fuel drum, and that was our real crisis point. We were worried that that wouldn't get past that, and it actually gave us the best enzyme activity we've had out of any of our reactors when we did the last scale-up step, so we're not terribly worried about that anymore.
Real-world application is another thing entirely.
What sort of viscosity have we got down there at the starch?
The Swinburne research is mostly funded by Pratt Industries. And it's here, in the noisy swelter of their cardboard recycling machine, that they want to use the enzyme.
The enzyme does survive in 50-degree heat. So as soon as it can be made in vast enough quantities, it can be added right at the start, directly into these monstrous pulpers.
For the company, success will mean greater profits and a jump on their competitors. By using the fungal enzyme to digest the lignin, they'll be able to use more newsprint and other low-grade waste, and fewer chemicals. The end product will be a better grade of recycled paper, stronger and less likely to turn brown in the sun.
Lignin itself has a highly aromatic structure, which is a very complex chemical structure that is very difficult to degrade, and therefore it has a structure in common with most intractable organic pollutants, all your nasties like polyaromatic hydrocarbons, DDT, your dioxins, and so it can use the same mechanisms to degrade those compounds as well.
For the white rot fungus, defeating lignin may prove to be just the first victory in a series of environmental battles.
In fact, white rot fungus is now being trialled for cleaning up an organochloride-contaminated site in Sydney. We'll keep you posted on how that trial goes. And that's Quantum for this week. Next week, searching for gold from space.
In Australia, satellites were something funny that went up across the skies, went tweet, tweet, tweet in the night.
The winners of the 1995 Australia Prize, using satellites to change the way we view our planet. That's Quantum next Wednesday at 8. I do hope you can join us. Until then, good night.
Tomorrow in The Big Picture, we look at the greatest scandal in American political history, as the people involved in Watergate and the investigators who revealed their crimes tell their story for the first time. Will new evidence show that Nixon really was responsible? Find out in Watergate tomorrow night at 9:30. Shortly, our ABC special, The World of Jim Henson.